Hi, and welcome to my channel. I thought that I would do a couple of catch-up videos for anybody who is just joining us. So if you've watched all the videos, there's not going to be anything new in here. I'm literally going to be playing through or watching through the old videos and just updating on everything that's happened so far with our Miller family. So we live in Windenburg right now, which we're pretending like is medieval England. And we are starting in the year 1300 with our two main starting characters, and they are Edmund and Grace. They are teenagers and they have just gotten married and spent the first year just building their new house. Edmund also spent a lot of that time dying over and over because I didn't know how to turn off the emotional deaths at first. So we spent a lot of time trying to get Edmund to not die. And our first babies were born, and it was twins. And so Grace had Sebastian and baby Faith. And we also had our first baby Death because Faith failed her role and she died. And that was the end of 1300. 1301 was a pretty quiet year compared to our first year. We did get our first llama. We named him Lenny the llama. And we had to make kind of a new house. I lost my save game and I had to start over. So we got a new house out of it. And that was about it in 1301, although Grace is pregnant with the next baby. 1302 is kicked off with a new baby. It's a boy, and we name him Robert. He lives, and everything goes really well until it's time for Sebastian to age up, and our very first baby, Sebastian, dies as a toddler. Then we end the year by getting a new cow. Now, moving into 1303, Grace is pregnant again. This time, she has twin boys. They are named Edward and Hugh. Edward dies, but we get to keep Hugh. The other good news from 1303 is that Robert grows up and becomes a toddler. 1304 brings the most chaos we've ever had in our house when our quadruplets are born. They are Mary, Michael, Cooper, and Solomon. So one girl, 3 boys, and our lives become quite chaotic at that point. But the other good news is that Hugh ages up to be a toddler and he lives. So everybody this year lives. 1304 was a very busy year. 1305 had nothing significant happen, so we jumped to 1306 where the quads age up. That's the good news. Mary, Michael, and Cooper are all doing great. Solomon, on the other hand, dies. And at the very end of the year, we have another baby, William, who also dies. 1307 again brings us nothing but a new baby, Alice, who dies. And 1308 brings us Robert aging up into a kid, and it's our first child who has not died. Also in 1308, we get a little remodel of our house, and this is kind of how it's going to continue to look for quite a few years. So this is our first big remodel, and we close out 1308 with Grace pregnant again. And we're closing out this decade in 1309 with a new baby named Emma, who also dies. We also close out this year with a new baby named Adam, who also dies. The only bright spot and the best part of this year is that Hugh ages up right in the middle of the year, and we now have 2 children on our farm, as well as the 3 toddlers. This has been so much fun to play. It's been so much fun to look back on the first 10 years of playing this. It seems like it's been forever because I'm almost in the third decade in this game. And so it's just been a lot of fun going back and re-looking at everything. And I think I'm going to start doing these every 10 episodes. So every time I get to a 10-year mark, I'll make a recap video and that video will come out. If you want to see any of these videos, they will all be linked below, and the playlist will be linked at the end of the video. You can pick up there. If you liked this and you're ready to jump into 1310, I will make sure I link that video below so that you can catch up. Otherwise, I will see you guys in my next video. Bye. Hello and welcome to my channel. This is going to be the recap for the years 1310 to 1319 with our Miller family. We kicked off 1310 with a brand new set of family pictures. I loved how we went from just Edmund and Grace at the beginning to having Edmund and Grace with their child Robert and then 4 toddlers. We have Hugh, and then we have the 3 triplets, Mary, Michael, and Cooper. It was so cool to just see the difference in just the 2 teenagers striking out on their own, and now them with their ever-growing family. So also in 1310, we aged up all 4 of the toddlers. First, Hugh went and aged up, and he was fine. And then Mary, Michael, and Cooper all rolled good roles, and they got to age up as well. We then added new set of twins to the family, Bernard and Beatrice, who also rolled really well. We had a great year of rolling in 1310. Then we moved into 1311, which was kind of a year of nothing, partly because I accidentally played without having the recorder on, and also because there was just nothing going on. There were no birthdays, there was no celebrations, nothing happening, just living our normal lives. So we moved right in to 1312, which was also almost a year of nothing, but we did get to age up the twins. Bernard and Beatrice aged up, and they're both toddlers, and they both rolled really well. Then we move into 1313, where we get a new cat. Technically, Michael gets a new cat, and the cat's name is Fish. This year, we also did a little bit of renovating outside the house. We got a new water wheel. We expanded our stream so that it wraps kind of around the side or off to the side of the screen, and we're able to put in the water wheel over there. We made a little bridge going to our laundry section. We just redid the outside of the house a little bit, or the landscaping. Then we move into 1314, where a lot of things happen. First of all, Edmund becomes an adult. He rolled really well, and now he's all grown up. He's an adult. And Grace also became an adult this same year, just later in the year, and she rolled really well, so she's also an adult. We also ended the year with a new baby, Clara, who rolled well and got to live. Then we hit 1315, and the drought begins. We also had our very first blizzard. And our Robert aged up into a teenager, and he did not have a good roll, and he died. The good news of the year was that Clara aged up to a toddler, and the twins aged up to children, and everybody rolled well, and they all lived. Then we jump into 1316, where Hugh becomes a teenager. He also gets to go and meet Eve, who became his future wife, who will become his future wife. And we get to celebrate Christmas for the first time. They all opened gifts and traded gifts with each other, and they even got a visit from Father Winter. It was a pretty good way to end 1316. 1317 continued the good news with Daniel being born and living. Then also, halfway through the year, the triplets aged up. Mary, Michael, and Cooper all aged up to teenagers, and they all rolled really well. I also had them roll to see who would get married and who wouldn't, and Mary and Michael both rolled to get married, and Cooper rolled to not get married. So Cooper will be becoming a priest and moving out to live at the church. Also, we end 1317 with Mary hanging out with Adrian, who she's going to marry next year. So 1318 brings us the end of the drought. Our animals are back. The drought is over. We have a new set of twins. Baby Ethel and Edmund are born, and they both roll to survive. We have Mary get married, which is our first wedding of one of our children. It was so nice. And Daniel aged up into a toddler, and everybody rolled well, and everybody lives. And now, 1319, we're closing out this decade with Edmund becoming an elder. He rolled really well, and including he rolled the maximum number of years that he gets to live as an elder. So we know we're going to have him with us for 10 more years, and we're so excited about it. Also this year, Clara becomes a child, and she rolls really well. And Hugh gets married. That means that our heir is now married, and we get to move Eve into our house. We also discover that Eve is a magic user. She tries to do her first spell, which was to repair something outside, and instead she set everything on fire. Also, our twins, Ethel and Edmund, aged up, and Edmund failed his role and passed away as a toddler. The little bit of good news that happened before that, though, was that Mary had her first baby. So we have our first grandchild, our first set of generation number 3, and his name is Frey, and he rolled really well, and he lived. Then we close out this decade, we close out this year with Eve being pregnant. So maybe our next heir is on the way. We don't know. This has just been really fun to look back on these 10 years, and I had a lot of fun playing them. I had a lot of fun going back and reminiscing about everything, and I can't wait to see how the next 10 years are going to change us. So the next recap episode will be out as soon as I can get it put together. One of the things I will ask is if you know anybody that likes to watch the sim videos, but they don't want to go back and catch up with 30 videos, send them this recap and just let them know that I'm going to be recapping the next 10 years, and then they'll be able to just pick up there. Or they can watch the first recap and pick up at year 1310. It's up to them, whatever they want to do. But this just seems to be a good way for us to all go back and remember everything that happened and kind of prepare us for the next 10 years. So I'm going to be doing the next one. And then after that, they should happen regularly after the 10th episode. After the 10 years, then there should be a recap episode. So that's going to do it for this one. And I will see you guys in my next video. Bye. Welcome to our recap from 1320 to 1329. If you have not been following along in the Decades Challenge and you want to know what's been happening, stop right now and go to the recaps from 1300. So there are 2 recaps before this. If you are all caught up, then let's just continue with 1320 to 1329. So we kicked off 1320 with new family pictures. I loved this picture, having everybody together. What I didn't like was that I was still having the issues with getting their bodies correct. And so some of them looked really good and some of them were really too close up and other weirdness. So anyway, that's all fixed by 1330. So just be patient if it annoys you as much as it annoys me in 1320. Anyway, other things that happened this year is all of our teens, Mary, Michael, and Cooper. Well, Mary's already moved out. Michael and Cooper will age up, and Cooper moves out, and Michael gets married and moves out. So we have great things happening this year in 1320. We also have sad things happening. Hugh, who is our heir, and his wife Eve have their first baby, and of course I named him Sebastian. Sebastian is my favorite name, and I will name every first heir Sebastian until I get one that stays alive. And maybe I'll just do it even if they do live, but Sebastian was born and he died. So I was really sad about it. They were sad about it. Everybody was sad about it. Then at the end of the year, to make everybody smile again, Mary had a baby and her name was Gwendolyn and she lived. So we end 1320 on a really high note. Then we jump into 1321 where our mom, Grace, ages up to an elder and we roll and discover that she's going to live for only 4 more years. So we know that we have 4 years with her, so we are just enjoying our time. We jump over to Mary's house where her son Frey becomes a toddler and he rolls really well. We also go over and visit Michael's house where he has 2 new cats, Shark and Dolphin, because Fish is going to be passing away. And so he got Shark and Dolphin so that he was not alone and he still had his cats. We also, on our house, added in a fence area over in the garden just to kind of keep the chickens more organized and to start building up our garden area over there. And we close out 1321 with the really great news that Eve had baby Hannah and they both lived. So now we have our first girl. Hugh has his first girl and his first baby that lived in 1321. Then we move over to Mary's house at the beginning of 1322 because she is having a baby and we are aging up Gwendolyn. So first, Isabella is born, such a pretty name, but she dies. Then the good news is that Gwendolyn ages up to a toddler and she lives. So we get some bad roles, but we also get some really good roles. Then back to our main house where our twins, Bernard and Beatrice, both become teenagers and they both rolled really well. We also rolled for Beatrice and Bernard to get married and Beatrice rolled to never get married. So she, when she moves out, will be moving out into the orphanage/cemetery that we have to take care of the orphans who live there. Then in 1323, in what seems like no time at all, Shark and Dolphin age up and become adult cats. This is also where I realize that they're not actually related and that Shark is a male and Dolphin is a female. And so that is just foreshadowing for what might happen later. Also this year, we roll for Hugh, our heir, to become an adult, and he does a great job. We also have a lot of people that age up in 1323. So first, we have Ethel, who becomes a child and rolls really well. Hannah becomes a toddler and rolls really well. Daniel becomes a child and rolls well. Adrian becomes an adult. So Mary's husband, Adrian, becomes an adult, and he rolls really well. So I'm a little worried that things have gone so well in 1323, so I started becoming paranoid that things might happen badly. Anyway, also in this year, Eve, again, practicing her magic, starts another fire. It just seems to be a theme with Eve doing magic. Anyway, we end the year of 1323 with Beatrice moving out and moving into the orphanage where she is going to help Sister Terry take care of the orphans. Now, moving into 1324, Hugh's wife Eve is pregnant again and she gives birth to John. And so now we have a potential heir. He rolls to live. So at least right now, our heir is a baby. We also head over to Mary's house where her toddler, Frey, becomes a child and he rolls really well. And then we have Mary, Michael, and Cooper are all becoming young adults and they all roll well. 1323 and 1324 have just been the best years. We end this baby with Mary having baby Kavanaugh, who also lives. Then we move into 1325 and our good luck with rolls and our good luck with just happiness in general kind of takes a turn right here. So first of all, I do share what the family tree looks like at the beginning of 1325. That happens at every year that ends in 5. So at 1335, we'll also take a look at the family tree. But we look at it, if there is a picture of someone on the family tree, that means they have passed away. If there's not a picture, then they're still living. That was the easiest way for me to keep up with what was going on. So in this year, at the very beginning of 1325, we lose our matriarch, Grace. We knew it was coming. We knew that we only had 4 years with her, but it just seemed to pass so quickly. Also, Hugh's wife, Eve, ages up to become an adult, and she rolls really well. Then we go over to visit Michael's house because Millie is having a baby. So Millie has baby Leo, their only child, and he dies. It was so sad. We head back to the main house because it's time for John, our heir, to become a toddler. I was so worried about this, but he rolled really well and he was fine. Then, to close out this year, Eve has another boy. His name is Michael, and he rolls really well. Unfortunately, Eve rolled a 1, which is the only number you roll if you die in childbirth. So we lose our second generation matriarch right here at the very beginning. So she has 3 children alive, and 2 of them are boys. So we have 2 shots at an heir right now. So we will just see how things go from here. We kick off 1326 with Bernard getting married, and he is going to immediately start trying for a family. We have our Clara age up to be a teenager, and she meets her husband. She actually meets him a little bit early, and the wedding has to be moved up a little bit, if you know what I mean. Also, we went over to Mary's house so that Kavanaugh could grow up to be a toddler, and he did not make it. Also, we go back to our main house. I was so excited that we got our water wheel back, and I was like, great, it just means things are happening around here and things are picking back up. And baby Hannah, it was time for her. She wasn't a baby, she was a toddler, but it was time for her to become a child, and she dies. So now Hugh, our heir, only has 2 children, 2 boys left, John and Michael. And we move into 1327 with Michael becoming a toddler, and he rolled really well. We also celebrated All Souls Day, and what we're going to be doing for that day is we're going to be heading over to the cemetery every year and just having a remembrance day for everybody that we've lost. And so this was kind of the first time I set everything up, and of course it was raining and things just didn't work exactly the way I wanted them to, but I figured out how to fix that because in the future we will create groups, and then we can get together with our groups and it works a lot better. But that was our first All Souls Day celebration. Also, in that same day, Clara got married because we had to move the wedding up. And she and Howard, at the end of the year, welcome baby Nathaniel, who rolls really well. Also, Bernard and Olive welcome their first baby, Olivia, but she sadly passes away. So in 1328, we don't have anything going on, no birthdays, nothing. So we decide to spend the time playing with the groups. So I create the Miller men and the Miller women, and we have a couple of gatherings at our homestead just so the family can hang out with their dad. This is going to be the last year that he's alive. He'll be dying next year. We already know that. And so we're just having a few gatherings where all of his kids are over. They're hanging out. I had some issues figuring out what activities to do in the groups where people were not cooking constantly at my house. And so anyway, we just played with the groups and kind of figured that out in the year 1328 to get us ready for the final year, 1329. The last year of this decade, we have quite a few birthdays, and our dad, our patriarch, passes away. So let's kick it off with Nathaniel. Clara's son, Nathaniel, becomes a toddler and he rolls really well. Then our heir, John, becomes a child and he also rolls really well. So it's looking good that we're going to have at least one heir continue from Hugh's family. Then our Papa Edmund dies and everybody came. Everybody was there. It was actually really sweet. I really liked it. Then we immediately follow Clara back to her house where she has baby Penelope, who rolls well and lives. Back in our main house, we have a couple of birthdays. Daniel becomes a teenager, and Daniel and Ethel are the last 2 children that Edmund and Grace had. And so Daniel is our last boy, and he became a teenager. And so next year in 1330, he'll be getting married and moving out, or 1331, sometime around there. Then we had Hugh become an adult, and he rolled really well. So our heir is still alive, and even though he has 2 boys now, he is still alive, and our household is shrinking and shrinking. We do end this year going and visiting Bernard and Beatrice at their houses to age them up, and Beatrice fails her role. So she passes away at the orphanage where she lives, and we will be visiting her grave next year on All Souls Day. That ends everything from 1320 to 1329. This was the year that we lost our matriarch and patriarch from the very beginning. So it has been really cool watching everything that's happened. They had 19 children, and watching those kids age up and have kids of their own, and it's just been awesome. So I really, really liked this decade. I think this might have been my favorite decade just because we had more people established. We had a wider family, I guess, and just more people in general around the place. So it was very cool. Anyway, I will put the link for the 1330 video right after this, and that's where you can pick up if you want to start watching them year by year. Otherwise, after I finish the 1330s, there will be a recap video for that as well. And if you've missed anything else, there are tons of playlists, and links and everything will be below for all of the playlists. I'm trying to make a playlist for every decade so that the playlist won't include, 700 videos, but it'll just be the decade videos in the playlist. So that's what we have going on. If anybody has any questions, any suggestions, any comments, anything that you want to talk about, I would love to chat with you down in the comment section below. If you have friends that like to watch the sim games, especially these historical plays, please share this with them, and don't forget to hit the notification bell so that you will get notified every time a new video comes up. I will see you guys in the next one. Bye. Hi, and welcome to the recap video of the 1330s. We, of course, started it out with our new family pictures. That's always my favorite part, going and looking at what all has changed in the last 10 years and getting everybody's pictures and their families all separated and situated and all of that stuff. I love it so much, and I love looking at the picture. I love it so much that every time I do a new decade picture, that becomes my background screen on my computer. So I see it all the time, and I love it. Now, we also had Ethel become a teen. So as soon as we took the pictures, they were no longer accurate, because in the very beginning of this year, Ethel became a teen, and she rolled really well, so she lived. We had child Michael, who is little Michael, we've been calling him, and he became a child and rolled really well. And Mary, Michael, and Cooper rolled to become adults. Sadly, Mary died, and so Adrian lost Mary when they just had Frey and Gwendolyn in their house, and now we have Adrian living with the kids, and Michael and Cooper both aged up, no problem. We also finally got to cook our turkey dinner for Christmas. It was fantastic. It was a rousing success, and Hugh did a fantastic job of cooking it. Oh, and then at the dinner was actually when Mary died. I rolled everything before we had the dinner, and so Mary died at the dinner while everybody was there at Christmas. And then Penelope became a toddler. This is Clara's youngest daughter, and she rolled really well. That ended 1330 for us. It was a year of ups and downs for sure. In 1331, Ethel moved out. That happened off camera so that she could move into the orphanage because she rolled to never get married. We also had Frey, who was Mary's oldest son, become a teenager, and he rolled really well. He also rolled to get married, and so that will be coming up. That is the end of 1331, and in 1332, Clara had her next baby, and his name was Robert, and he died. We also that year had Daniel's wedding, and he also got a new puppy, Bandit. We had Nathaniel aging up into a child. That is Clara's oldest son. We had Olive becoming a young adult and Millie becoming an adult. We also had Adrian becoming an elder, and he only got 1 more year with us. We also had kittens with Dolphin and Shark, and Gwendolyn became a teenager. She will be getting married in just a year, and Frey has moved out to go live in France. That's how 1332 ended. Then we began 1333, which is the saddest year that we've ever had. We kicked the year off with Daniel's wife, Adeline, and his daughter, Silver, both dying, when Adeline died in childbirth and Silver died just after. We did have the good news of Frey moving into his house in France, and we also had Clara and Howard both aging up. Clara became a young adult and Howard became an adult. Also, Howard's parents became elders. And we did lose Adrian this year, though, as well. But we ended the year with Gwendolyn and Christopher getting married, which was fantastic, and Bandit aging up from a puppy to an adult. So 1334 kicked off with Penelope aging up to a child and the kittens both aging up. We also expanded our garden area out from the main house, and Frey had his wedding over in France. Then moving into 1335, we got to see the family tree and how it all looked with everything updated and everybody that's passed away and everybody that's been born in the last 10 years added to the family tree. It is starting to get bigger and bigger. It's very cool. We also had Daniel get married again. He married Anaya, and Mary English died, which is Howard's mom. Gwendolyn had her first babies, and they were twins, Tomisia and Thomas. We later changed Tomisia's name to Thomasina. And at the end of the year, Bernard died. Then moving into 1336, our heir, John, became a teenager. So he rolled really well, and he is still the heir. We also had Blanche over in France, Frey's wife, had their first baby, Amy, and everybody rolled really well. Also, Daniel became a young adult and rolled well, but Dolphin, the cat, died. Dolphin died of old age, so I guess it wasn't so bad. 1337 brought us war, and this is the first time that our family has had to deal with war, and so all of the eligible men in our main and side households all rolled, and John, Daniel, and Christopher all had to go to war. That same year, Thomasina and Thomas aged up to become toddlers, and they rolled really well. Ethel aged to a young adult, and she rolled well. Amy, over in France, rolled to become a toddler, and she did not, so Amy died. Little Michael, in our main household, got to age up to a teen at the same time that Shark, the cat, died. Also, we ended the year with Christopher becoming a young adult. Also, his baby Denise was born the same year without us, and baby Blanche was born over in France, and everybody lived and everybody rolled really well. Then moving into 1338, Robert English died of old age, and Clara decided she and her family moved in to Anaya's house, where Anaya had just given birth to Daniel's second daughter, their first daughter together, Liana, and Liana died. That was the sad part. The happy part is that Hugh, our main heir, got to become an elder, and we have him for 9 more years. So that is something definitely to look forward to. Also, Frey became a young adult, and Olive became an adult, and both of them had really good roles. So we headed into the last year of the decade, 1339, with Denise becoming a toddler and John rolling for the second part of his teenhood, and both of them rolled really well. Also this year, our little Michael died from being hysterical and thankfully was able to be revived by his dad's pleading with the Grim Reaper. We also had baby Blanche age up over in France and become a toddler, and she rolled really well. And Clara became an adult. Also, in France, they had a baby and named her Gwendolyn, and she rolled really well. Then we had Nathaniel, Clara's son, became a teenager and he rolled really well. So he will be getting married in just a few years. Then we rolled for Michael and Cooper to both become elders, and they both rolled and died. So we had a really big party, and we invited everybody over, and Michael and Cooper, Nathaniel aged up at the party, and then Michael and Cooper both died at the party. Then we ended the decade with Gwendolyn becoming a young adult. So she is in her house without her husband, who is in the war. Anaya is in her house without her husband, who is in the war. And John is in the war, but he knows who he's going to marry just as soon as he gets home in a couple of years. So that ended the 1330s. I hope that you guys enjoyed this recap, and I look forward to seeing you in the 1340s. Bye. Welcome to our recap episode where I walk you through everything that happened with our family in the 1340s. So just like every other decade, we kick this one off with some family photos. Okay, this is always my favorite part of the process, going back and looking. Here is who started it all, Edmund and Grace in 1300. Then in 1310, they had 5 children, including the 3 triplets. That would be these 2 and her. This is Hugh, who is right now our heir, and he's an old man. This is Hugh that we're following. This is Edmund, our original heir, and this is Hugh, our current heir, in 1320. Then in 1330, we have Hugh here as our current heir. His dad has already died, and here is our next heir. This is John, and he's our current next heir. And here's everybody else. And then we move to 1340. Now, y'all, I thought there would be a big difference in the number of people in 1330 to 1340. There are 2 more people. That's it in 1340. So let's look at them really quickly. We do have Hugh, who is an old man looking adorable. Here's John, our heir. Here is Michael, our next in line right here. Now, in 1340, Thomasina and Thomas both aged up to kids, and they rolled really well. Michael got married. Gwendolyn aged up to a toddler, and she died. And Mary was born, and she lived. Then, in 1341, Penelope became a teenager, and she lived. And Anaya became a young adult, and she lived. Also in 1341, we had All Saints' Day at the cemetery, and it went better with all the groups that we made, but it still wasn't perfect. But we had All Saints' Day at the cemetery. Over in France, Blanche became an adult and rolled really well, and Millie became an elder, and we found out we had 1 year left with her. And Michael and Jewel had triplets, Flora, Fauna, and Frederick. And Flora and Fauna lived, and Frederick died. It is 1342. I know that you're looking at this like, why are we here at Family Pictures again? But there is some good news and some bad news. First of all, the good news, because everybody likes good news, is that all 3 of our guys made it home from the war absolutely fine, and they all went home and immediately got their wives pregnant, except for John, who wasn't actually married. So John had a wedding that very first day that we came home, and Isla did not get pregnant. The next day, we went to visit baby Mary. We aged her up. We went to Daniel's house to make sure that Anaya was pregnant, and we aged him up. And Anaya is indeed pregnant. Then we went over to Howard's house, and we made him an elder. All of those people lived through all of their roles, and everything was going well. Penelope got married because she's now a teenager. Then the next day, we aged up Denise, who is right here. She lived. We aged up Nathaniel. Well, we didn't age him up, but we rolled for his second teenagehood, and he got married as well. So, on the last day of this year, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 pregnant people. as we wrap up 1342. Then we move to 1343, where John becomes a young adult and he rolls well. Henry is born and he lives. Aurora is born and she does not live. Francine is born and she lives. Bandit becomes an elder. Ethel becomes an adult. Flora and Fauna both become toddlers, and everybody rolls really well. John, our heir, and Isla have their first two babies, Sarah and Sarah lives and Sybil dies. Nathaniel and his wife Alina have their first son, Howard. Howard lives, but Alina dies in childbirth. And we end the year with Adrian being born, and he lives. We had 7 babies born this year. Then we move to 1344. Jewel becomes a young adult and she rolls really well and gives birth to twin girls, Winter and Snow, and they both roll well. Daniel and Anaya have baby Allison, the first baby to live at their house. Henry becomes a toddler and rolls well. We spend the day with Daniel watching Bandit constantly get sprayed or bitten or whatever because of all the bushes around the house. And then we spend Christmas with everybody at the main house. We end the year with Bella being born and rolling well, and Francine becoming a toddler and rolling well. Then we move to 1345 and we get our family tree recap. This is how far we have to zoom out to get everybody in the tree right now. And the problem that we're having right now is that every time somebody like this is Hugh, every time his kids have kids, the gap between his siblings has to spread out. And then this is Mary. And so the gap between her and Michael is really spread out. So anyway, it's just going to keep moving us. I think that actually I've been trying to put Edmund and Grace like in the middle, and it's always been Cooper. But I think now that this is spread out more, the middle might be Michael right now. Anyway, none of that matters. Let's zoom in and look at what we have. So these are the first 4 kids that we had. None of them lived to adulthood. Then we had Hugh, who is our heir. And Hugh right now, y'all, has 7 grandkids. 6 girls and 1 boy, and the 1 boy has passed away, and then we lost one of the girls. So John had twins, Sarah and Sybil. Sarah is still alive. I will remind you, if you see a picture of someone up here, that means they have passed away. If there's not a picture, they're still alive. So we have John and Isla. They have only had baby Sarah and Sybil died, and Isla is pregnant right now. Then we move over to Michael and Jewel. They are both alive, and they have had a set of triplets and a set of twins. So 2 of the girls from the set of triplets are both toddlers right now, Flora and Fauna, and then brand new babies, Winter and Snow, are at their house. Then we move to Mary's children, and Mary had 4 kids, 2 of which lived to adulthood. So Frey married Blanche. He lives in France, and he has had 5 kids, 4 baby girls, and then a baby boy. And 2 of his baby girls died as toddlers, Amy and Gwendolyn. Then Frey has Blanche, Mary, and baby Adrian, who are still alive at his house. And his sister, Gwendolyn, married Christopher. They're both still alive, and they have had 5 children, and they are all alive. They had a set of twins, Thomasina and Thomas. Then they had Denise. All 3 of these kids are children right now. Henry is a toddler, and Bella is their newest baby girl. Then we lost Michael and Millie in the last 10 years since we did this update. We also lost Cooper since we did the update. And Bernard's wife, Olive, is still alive. She doesn't have any children. And then we get to Clara, who is the next person that's having grandbabies. Clara has 2 grandchildren, and they were both born in the same year. So her son, Nathaniel, and his wife, Alina, had Howard. Alina died in childbirth. Then we have Penelope, who married Stein, and they have baby Francine. Penelope is also about to give birth at any moment. And that is Clara's line over here. Then we have Daniel, the only one of Gen 2 that is still having children. And that is because he married Adeline, and they had baby Silver, and both mom and baby died in childbirth. Daniel then married Anaya, and Anaya had Liana, who died while Daniel was at war. Then as soon as he got back from war, they had Aurora, who also died. And then they just had baby Allison, who is still alive. And then we have Ethel, who is the youngest of Generation 2 and who rolled to never get married. So that is our whole big family tree. John and Isla have another set of twins, Carol and Sebastian. We finally have an heir in the main household. They both roll really well. Also, Sarah, their sister, becomes a toddler and rolls well. Diana is born and she lives. Frey is born and he lives. Adrian becomes a toddler and rolls well. And Howard, Nathaniel's baby, who lost his mother, becomes a toddler and dies. We spend the day with Gwen over at her house trying to get rid of all the nannies who are there. And baby Eleanor is born at Daniel and Anaya's house and she dies. And Winter and Snow both become toddlers and Winter lives and Snow dies. Allison, back at Daniel and Anaya's house, becomes a toddler and she lives. Then we move into 1346, where Bandit has to die. We also have Nathaniel's second wedding to Morgan. Bella becomes a toddler and rolls well. We spend the day with Penelope, just getting to know them. It's the first time we've really spent the day with them, and so getting to know everybody in their house and how everybody is doing. Then back at our main household, we have another set of twins, Felicia and Felix dies. Gwendolyn has her last child, Gold, is born, and she rolls well. Then we have Carol and Sebastian and Diana all becoming toddlers, and they all rolled really well. Nathaniel becomes a young adult. Also this year, John got a familiar. It's an owl named Athena. Over in France, Frey becomes a toddler and he dies. And back at Michael's house, Flora and Fauna become children and they both roll really well. Back to France for their final baby to be born. Her name is from one of our viewers, Garance, and she lives. We end the year with baby Helen being born, and she dies. In 1347, war comes again. So we rolled for all of the males in our houses that were teens, young adults, or adults, and the only person who had to go to war was Nathaniel. We had a large family get-together at our house to spend some time with Hugh because he's going to be passing away soon. Everybody was there. It was very cool that everybody came. Of course, I finally got the groups working a lot better now. While Nathaniel was gone to war, his wife Morgan had a baby named Nathaniel, and he died. Mary becomes a child, and she lived. Anaya becomes an adult, and she rolled really well. And then we say bye to Hugh out in his garden doing what he loved. Michael and Jewel have a boy. They name him Michael, and he lives. Stein becomes a young adult. Olive becomes an elder, and we only have 1 year left with Olive. Back at our main house, Isla and Ingrid, the twins, are born, and Isla dies, and Ingrid lives. Thomas and Thomasina both become teens. We have our first teenagers in this generation. And Felicia becomes a toddler, and everyone rolls really well. Gold also becomes a toddler this year. Gwendolyn's youngest child becomes a toddler this year. And then we spent the day with Frey right before we started our plague rolls. And then we spent the day with Frey. We haven't spent time with this family in France either, so we got to rearrange their house a little bit and just get everybody knitting and crocheting. Not crocheting, that's not a thing, but knitting and cross-stitching, and they were having a really good time until the plague struck their family. So we did the plague rolls for the Vine family and then for Frey's family. our first family is going to start rolling, and we're going to start at the bottom with the baby. So this is for baby Garance. Oh my gosh, I'm never going to be able to say her name, but this is for her. She lives. Next is Adrian. He lives. Next is little Blanche. She dies. Next is Mary. She lives. Next is Big Blanche. She lives. And last is Frey. He dies. Then we came over to our war location and we did rolls for the people at war. So first we're rolling for Captain Keene. He lives. And now we're rolling for Nathaniel at war. He dies. And that ended 1347. Moving into 1348, it was really just a lot of plague rolls. So I will kind of walk you through what happened in 1348. We started with plague rolls at the cemetery. We're starting with Richard, and he dies. Then we go to John, and he dies. Then we go to our Ethel, and she dies. Then we go to Sister Terry, and she lives. Then we move to plague rolls at Michael's house. The baby's name is Baby Michael, so that's who we're rolling for first. He dies. Winter, she dies. Flora, she dies. Fauna, she lives. Michael, he lives. Jewel, she lives. The one good news about this day is that Henry rolled to become a child, and he rolled really well. Then we had plague rolls at the English house, which was devastating that we lost every single person. Then we did plague rolls at the Cooper house. So we're just going to start on this end. So that's the way we're going to go up from there. So here's Bella. She lives. Here's Gold. She lives. Here's Denise. She lives. Here's Henry. He dies. Here's Thomasina. She dies. Here's Thomas. He dies. Here's Gwendolyn. She lives. And here's Christopher. He lives. Then we had some really good news. Garance over in France became a toddler and rolled well. Francine rolled to become a child and rolled well. Stein was born to Penelope and rolled well. And we said bye to Olive because she had her last year, so she died of old age. Then Judith was born and she rolled well. And so things really were looking up a little bit. And then we did our plague rolls for Daniel first. So this is just going to be for baby Judith. Here it goes. She dies. Okay, here's Allison. She dies, y'all. Here's Anaya. I don't even know what to say about this. She dies. Here's Daniel. I think it's even worse. I think it is even worse that Daniel lives. Then we did our plague rolls for Penelope's house. So for this family, we will be starting with the brand new baby Stein, just born. He dies. Oh my God. Diana, she lives. Francine, she dies. Stein, he lives. Penelope, I'm so scared of this. Oh my gosh. She dies. And back at our main house, right before we did the plague rolls, we had new twins born, Kazia and Kellen, and they both lived. Then we did plague rolls at our main house. So first we're going to flip the coin. When I change it to the coin, it's going to be for Kellen. He was the last one born. He lives. Next is Keziah. She lives. Okay. Next is baby Ingrid. She lives. This is for Felicia. Let's find Felicia. She dies. Oh my gosh, I just went ahead and rolled for Sebastian and he dies. I was unprepared. I accidentally hit it. My Sebastian. Carol dies. Sarah is right here. She dies. Isla. She lives. Oh, but really, John, I need you to live. Oh my gosh, John dies. Okay. We lost everyone except our 3 babies and Isla. That ended 1348. So 1349 was more like a a remembrance, I guess. So I organized the cemetery and got everybody's markers where they needed to be, and we kind of did a tour of the cemetery and where everybody is now going forward and how it's going to look, and it's just all better organized for me to keep up with and hopefully for us to be able to use for our family as we go along. Then all of our roles went really well for the rest of 1349. Ingrid in our main household became a toddler and she lived. Denise at Gwendolyn's house became a teenager and she lived. And Bella at Gwendolyn's house became a child and she lived. So we're ending 1349 on a hopeful note. We have a plan going forward into 1350. We have an heir. His name is Kellen, and he is a very tiny baby. I will see you guys in 1350. Bye. Welcome to our 1350s recap. So we kicked off 1350 like we do every 10 years with new family pictures. We went through the 1300s all the way to our new pictures in 1350, talked about where all the people are in 1350, including the ones that are not living in England with the main family. And we kick off 1350 with Jewel becoming an adult and failing her role and dying. None of that ended up on video, sadly. So we kicked the video off. Kezia and Kellen both became toddlers this year and rolled really well as Isla rolled to become an adult and rolled really well. Michael also became an adult, and Blanche became an elder. The last thing that happened this year is that Denise got married. Blanche died just because when she rolled to become an elder, she only rolled for one more year. So Blanche died, leaving her 3 children alone in France. So Mary, her oldest child, stayed in France, and Adrian and Garance moved back to England to live with their cousin Gwendolyn in their Aunt Mary's house. And on the way, Garance aged up to a child and she rolled really well. We also had baby Gwendolyn born and she lived. We ended this year with Isla and Michael getting married. We left it up to chance. I rolled a dice to see if they would get married to each other, and it was a 50-50 chance, a coin toss, and they got married. Then we move into 1352. Not a lot happened at the beginning of this year. We still are trying to make up for all the devastation from the plague. But Ingrid becomes a child and she rolled really well. The last thing that we did to end this year is that Christopher became an elder and he's going to be with us for 8 more years. Then we move to 1353. Baby Gwendolyn becomes a toddler. We also had our first set of twins from Isla and Michael, Hugh and Helen, and Hugh lived and Helen died. Denise and Sebastian had baby Lawrence, and he lived. Then Francine's dad, Stein, or Penelope's husband, Stein, rolled to become an adult, and he died. So then we moved Francine in with Gwendolyn and Christopher just because she was a child and she needed a house. Then we had Kezia and Kellen age up to toddlers, and unfortunately Kezia died, but we still had Kellen, our heir, alive, and Flora became a teenager and rolled really well as well. In 1354, we started out with Mary becoming a teenager over in France. We also had Hugh become a toddler in our main household, and he rolled well. And another set of twins was born to Isla and Michael, Merryweather and Maleficent, and Merryweather died. We also had Flora's wedding, as well as Lawrence becoming a toddler and living, and Gwendolyn becoming an elder and dying. We move into 1355 with Mary over in France getting married and baby Nicholas being born. We also celebrated All Souls Day as Francine became a teenager. We had Sebastian become a young adult, and everybody rolled really well. We had our next set of twins at the main Miller house with Organa and Oliver rolled well and Organa did not. We had Adrian, Frey's son, the only Clark boy left, age up to be a teenager, and he rolled really well. And then Flora had her first baby. Baby Jewel was born, and she rolled really well. So 1356 then has Maleficent becoming a toddler. She rolled really well. We also had Francine get married, and over in France, baby Alonso was born, and he died. We had Nicholas becoming a toddler and rolling well. Gwendolyn became a child and rolled well. It was a good day at their house. And Denise also became a young adult and rolled well. So everybody at their house had good rolls. We ended out the year with baby Pippa being born and also rolling well. We kicked off 1357 with Adrian going off to war. We did our war rolls for all of our eligible guys, and Adrian was the only one that had to go to war. We had Oliver and Jewel both becoming toddlers, and Oliver lived and Jewel did not. We also had baby Stein born and Lucas on the same day, not in the same house, but baby Stein died and baby Lucas lived. The last thing that happened this year, and one of the highlights of 1357, was that Bella got married. In 1358, we immediately had Hugh aging up to be a child, and he died. But we had baby Frey born over in France, and he lived. We also had Pippa becoming a toddler, and she lived. Lawrence was becoming a child, and he died. We said that Hugh and Lawrence, since they were both the same age and cousins, that they both went out and got lost in the woods and froze to death. Anyway, it was sad. Gold, however, became a teenager and rolled really well, so that was good. We also had our next set of twins for Isla and Michael were born, and it was baby Quintina and Quentin, and they both lived. We also had a new baby at the Hammond house, baby Rose, and she lived. And then Garance aged up to a teenager, and she lived. We ended the year with a few births. So we had Arthur born to the Price family, and he died. And then we had Christopher born to the Archer family, and he lived. 1359 was definitely a year of ups and downs at the end of this decade. We kicked off the year with Lucas becoming a toddler, and he lived. Then we had Flora giving birth to twins, Simon and Solomon, and they both lived. We couldn't age Isla up to an elder because she was pregnant, but we did roll for her, and she has 3 years left with us. Maleficent became a child, and Michael became an elder. They all rolled really well, and we have 2 years left with Michael. We ended the year with some good news and some not so good news. So first, Ingrid became a teenager. Second, Isla gave birth to the last set of twins that she's going to have before she becomes an elder, and that was Edmund and Elijah, and they both rolled well. Then we went to visit Flora's house for Lucas to become a young adult, and he died, leaving Flora with a toddler and a set of newborn twins. So as we move into 1360, we've got to figure out a few things. We've got some stuff to decide, and if you are following along with us in real time and you're going to pick up in 1360, I do have some questions for you guys in that video. I have some things I want to know from you guys, and so I am really looking forward to hearing everything that you have to say about it. I would like to know what you thought about everything that happened and where you think we need to go into the future. I'm just envisioning that we have a little over 600 years left, and I am open to any and all ideas that you guys have about potential storylines or anything else that we could add in to just make this even more interesting as we follow this family and their extended generations through the years. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the 1360s. Bye. Hi, and welcome to the recap of the 1360s. I'm trying to find a better way to do this that doesn't take as much time or that is just a little bit more succinct. But anyway, I thought we could do it by talking about the births and the deaths that we have had over the whole entire decade instead of going year by year and doing that kind of thing. I just thought that might be more interesting. Anyway, this is the year or the beginning of when I decided to use months as well as years for birthdays and marriages and deaths and things like that. And so instead of just tracking the year somebody was born or the year they died, I have been tracking the months as well, which just plays into our family tree when we get there. But first thing in 1360 is our family pictures. I always love looking back at them, and I love creating the next decades pictures. It's always a lot of fun. So let's talk about some of the people who were born in this decade. We had Victor and Kian and Thomasina and Ursa and Vitalis, and they all lived. Then we lost Blanche. Then we got Willa, who lived. And then we lost Richard. Then we got Adam, who lived, and Andrew and Bruce and Penelope, who all lived. Then we had John, who died. Then we had Aurora, who lived, and Crispin, who also died. David died. Francine and Eustace both lived, and then Jeremiah died. Francis lived. Jillian died, and then Horace lived, as well as Isabel and Johanna. Then we lost Isla, but we kept Sebastian and Denise and Ingrid. We also kept Wallace and Katerina and Gold and Lettice, and then we lost Mark and Ida. But then we had Nicholas, who lived. And finally, we rounded out the decade with Owen and Porter and Rose all living, and then sadly Michael dying at the very end of 1369. So those are all the babies that we had during the 10 years. That is a large number of babies. Then we move to the people who got married. So first, we kicked off 1360 with Adrian's wedding, then Garance got married, then Ingrid got married. We had no weddings for a while, and then Kellen got married, and Gwendolyn got married, and Flora got married, all in a row. We ended the 1360s with Maleficent getting married. Okay, so now let's talk about the people who died in the last 10 years. We lost Quintina at the very beginning of the year, as well as Nicholas. We also lost Christopher from old age. We lost Michael from old age, as well as Isla. And then we lost Thomasina. We lost Lucas. And after a really long time, with some really good roles, we lost Aurora. And we ended the year with the loss of Kian. As you can tell, we had a lot more births than we did deaths this year, which is why at the end of this whole process, this is what our family looks like. We went from this in 1360 to this in 1370, and I cannot wait to jump in and get going with this. You let me know if you liked this. I know it's not as in-depth as the other wrap-ups, but I wanted to know what you thought about this. It doesn't seem like the wrap-ups are there for people to actually catch up on. It just kind of gives them information about what's going on and who was born and who died. So I thought I would just do it this way instead of the other way. But you guys let me know what you like. This one is definitely shorter and easier for me to edit, but I would rather do the one that you guys get the most benefit from, because it doesn't do me any good to actually take the time to do this one if it's not giving you guys what you want, meaning that you're not going to be watching it. So that's it. I would love your feedback, and otherwise I will see you guys in the 1370s. Bye. Okay, so as you guys know, first of all, Welcome to my channel. This is the recap of the 1370s. And as you guys know, I have been trying to figure out a good way of taking notes and keeping up with what happened during the decade and still being able to say it in a succinct manner that will, number one, save me the hours of editing that it took to do them the way I was doing them in the past, but they will also be beneficial because people have said that me going year by year was beneficial for them to understand what was happening. So what I thought I was going to do is put the families up there like this. So this is what our whole family looked like in 1370. Now, I thought the easiest way to do this was to just break it down by family colors. I will show you the pictures that I took as each person aged up, and we will just take it one family group at a time. I think that will be the easiest way to do this. So here is our red family. Now, this family in 1370 was kind of half in France and half in England, and so we're going to talk about what happened, but by the end of the decade, they are all over in France. So let's start first with Frey. In 1370, Frey became a teenager, and Richard Keene became an adult. That's all that happened in this family for that whole year. Then in 1371, Isabel became a child, and that's all that happened that year as well. In 1372, though, Victor became a teen, and Garance had her birthday. So two things that year. 1373, Willa became a teen, and that was all that happened. In 1374, however, Frey and Tess got married, and Aurora became an adult, and Frey celebrated his teen part 2 birthday. Then, in 1375, Victor became an elder and died, and baby Mary was born to Frey and Tess, and she died. Nothing but bad news in 1375. 1376, Victor celebrated his teen part 2, and Mary, the mom, became an elder. In 1376, baby Frey was born, and he lived, and Victor and Elena got married. In 1377, Tess celebrated her birthday and lived. Willa and Pierre got married, and those are only all the good things that happened this year. In 1377, Willa died while giving birth to baby Willa, and so they both died. Tess also had a new baby named Tess, and she also died. The other bit of good news is that Frey became a young adult and he lived, and Adrian became an elder and he lived. Then we move to 1378, where we have nothing but good news. Our baby Frey became a toddler and Isabel became a teenager. Then in 1379, Isabel got married to Gunderson. The only bad bit of news this year is that Richard, Isabel's dad, passed away when he became an elder. Then good news happened when Tess and Frey had baby Yesenia, and she lived. And that is how we round out the 1380s for the Red family. This is now what they look like. Okay, next we'll move to the Yellow family. They have a lot more people in their family. This is what they looked like in 1370, so it's going to take us a lot longer to discuss what happened to their family. But we will just start out by saying the Hammond family had a horrible, horrible decade. So first, in 1370, the good news. Porter Goodwin became a toddler. That's the youngest child in the Goodwin house is now a toddler. Horace Goodwin became a child, and Rose Hammond became a teenager and lived. Also over in the Hammond house, Frances died, and so did the dad, Sebastian. Also, we lost little Nicholas Jones over at the Jones house. Then in 1371, let's start with the bad news. Again, we lost a Hammond. It was Denise this time who passed away. And then Denise Jones over at her house passed away. Now, the good news is Christopher Archer became a teen, Gold Goodwin became an adult, and Gwendolyn Jones became a young adult, and everybody lived. In 1372, we have more devastating news at the Hammond house. Katarina Hammond and Pippa Hammond both died this year. The good news is that Gwendolyn Jones, baby Gwendolyn, became a toddler. Kian Goodwin became a teenager. Gold Goodwin became a child, and Ursa Archer became a teen. So that's all the good news that happened. In 1373, they had nothing happen to their family the whole year. Then we move to 1374, where it is almost all good news. We'll start with the bad. Gwendolyn Jones died this year, leaving her husband and all of their children. The good news. And Adam Hammond became a teen. So one bit of good news at the Hammond house, and also Rose Hammond became teen part 2. So that's good. Then Andrew Archer became a teenager. Bruce Goodwin became a teenager, and Porter Goodwin became a child. We did have a new birth, Victor, which is when unfortunately Gwendolyn died, but Victor lived, and Ursa Jones became a toddler. So some good and bad news at the Jones house. In 1375, great news, Christopher Archer got married to Maud, and Ursa Archer got married to Gilbert McCarthy. Nothing but good news still, Nicholas Jones became an adult, and his children, Gwendolyn and Sybil, both became children. In 1376, still nothing but good news for this family. Christopher Archer is born. Andrew McCarthy is born. Victor Jones becomes a toddler. Kian Goodwin and Maud Archer both do teen part 2, as does Ursa McCarthy. Then Eustace Goodwin becomes a teen, Andrew Archer becomes an elder, and Kian Goodwin gets married to Bray. Now, 1377. The only person that the Yellow family lost was Andrew Archer from elder. He just died of old age. Good news is his grandson Christopher became a toddler, and Horace Goodwin became a teenager. Also, Horace rolled to never get married. Then we moved to 1378, where so many things happened. Okay, first of all, Adam Hammond got married to Zuria, and Bruce Goodwin got married to Lavinia. We also have Andrew McCarthy becoming a toddler, Ursa Jones becoming a child, Adam Hammond, Andrew Archer, and Bruce Goodwin all did teen part 2s, and everybody lived. Kian and Bray lost their first baby, Kian Goodwin. He died as a newborn. But Ursa had her first baby, named Bella, and she lived. Our only deaths this year was Bella Archer, who died of old age when she became an elder, and Christopher Archer, who died as a young adult. So his wife and their son Christopher are left alone. Then 1379, we end out this decade with good news from them again. They had Gilbert McCarthy became a young adult, Victor Jones became a child, and Gold Goodwin became a teenager. Then they had 3 babies born, and they all lived. So Zuria Hammond, William Goodwin, and Lavinia Goodwin all lived. So here is the Yellow family at the end of 1379. Now we're going to move to our Blue family. It is our smallest family, and so there's only a few years where they even had anything happening. So we'll start in 1371, where Johanna Price became a child. That's the only thing that happened. Nothing but good news. Then in 1372, Lettice Price became a child, and Vitalis Price became a teenager. Still, nothing but good news. Then nothing happens until 1374, when Penelope Price becomes a teenager. Then in 1376, Francine Price rolls to become a teenager, and she dies. 1377, Vitalis gets married to Catherine. He also celebrated his teen too, and Mom Francine becomes an elder. 1378 is both a wonderful and an awful year for this family. So Penelope gets married to Grayson, and she immediately dies the very same year. That's our horrible bad news. She does have a baby. Baby Grayson is born that year. and he lives, but she dies just after having the baby. Johanna Price becomes a teenager, and also, in addition to Grayson being born, Vitalis has twin boys. Arthur and Vitalis Price are born as well. So then they round out the year with Johanna marrying Grayson. So she married Penelope's widower. And then the twins age up to toddlers, Arthur and Vitalis, and Lettice Price becomes a teen. So nothing but good news happening at the end of 1379 for the Blue family. Now we move to talk about the ones who are closest to our heir family, and that we're just calling them the side family, but they are our purple family. So they kick off 1370 looking like this. There's not that many of them. We have kind of three different families here. So Sybil Smith is born this year, and Owen Smith becomes a toddler, and Quentin Miller becomes a teen. In 1371, we lose Jeremiah Smith, and he leaves a pregnant wife and some small children at his house. We have the good news, though. Solomon McOtter, Edmund and Elijah Miller, and Oliver all roll teens and teen part twos, and they all live. And Ingrid Smith becomes a child, and she lives. 1372 is more good news. Sybil Smith becomes a toddler, Wallace Smith becomes a child, and Arna Summer becomes a young adult. Also that year, we have the twins, Isla and Isaac Summer born, and Theo Smith is born. In 1373, Solomon McOtter decides to move to Scotland and learn more about his father and his father's family and just connect with them. That year also, Isla and Isaac and Theo all become toddlers, and Ingrid Smith becomes an adult, and everyone lives. 1374, we have good news, nothing but good news. Quentin gets married to Elvira. Owen Smith becomes a child. Wallace Smith becomes an elder. Maleficent Summer becomes a young adult, and Quentin Miller does teen part 2. Moving into 1375, more weddings. This year, Solomon gets married to Isabel over in Scotland. Flora Smith becomes an elder. Edmund and Elijah both become teen part 2s, and Oliver becomes a young adult. Then in 1376, 2 weddings. Edmund gets married to Sophronia, and Elijah gets married to Lenata. We also have Flora Smith becoming a child, and Horror in Scotland, where Solomon loses his wife Isabel and his baby Lucas McOtter. Then we move to 1377. Edmund has his first baby, Edmund, who dies as a baby. The twins, Isla and Isaac, become children. Sophronia is teen part 2, and Theo Smith also becomes a child. Elijah and Lenata have their first baby, Elijah, who lives, but Quentin has a baby named Grace, and she dies. Then we move into 1378, where Quentin becomes a young adult and Arna becomes an adult. Edmund has another baby named Grace, and she dies. And Ingrid Smith becomes a teenager. We round out 1379 with a lot of good news and a little bit of bad news. So Quentin and his wife have a set of twins, Winifred and Quentin. And Quentin unfortunately dies, but Winifred lives. Then Elijah and Lenata have a baby girl named Lenata, and she lives. Then we have a lot of birthdays. So Elijah becomes a toddler, Wallace Smith becomes a teen, Solomon becomes a young adult, but not just Solomon. Solomon and Edmund and Elijah and Elvira, they all age up at the same time this year and become young adults. And so this is what the purple family looks like now at the end of the 1370s. And that brings us to just our main household and our main family. And this is what they looked like at the beginning of 1370. So we kick it off with Ida becoming a young adult. Then our Rose becomes a toddler, and Sebastian becomes a child. Then nothing else happens until 1374. Kellen comes home from war, and he dies. but not before Ida got pregnant. Also, Rose Miller becomes a child. So, in 1375, little baby Kellen is born, and it is Ida and the 3 children at the house. Then, in 1376, Kellen becomes a toddler, and Ida becomes an adult. Nothing else happens until 1378 when Sebastian becomes a teenager. And that is where we ended the 1370s with our main household. Our heir is Sebastian, and our next in line is baby Kellen. So this is our whole family and what they all look like in 1380. Thank you so much for joining me down memory lane. Let me know if you liked it better like this, if you didn't like it like this, how, what we can do differently next time to help with any kind of recap stuff. I would love to do that and to hear your thoughts about it. So I will see you in the next episode. Thanks for watching. Bye. Welcome to the recap of the 1380s. We're going to be doing this a little bit differently this time. I wanted to look at something more like this. We have the main household in 1380 and the main household in 1390. We have our purple family in 1380 and then what they look like in 1390. 1380 and 90 for our blue. 1380 and 90 for our blue family. And 1380 and 90 for our yellow family, leaving only the red family. And that's the one we're going to start with. So, in our red family, we had 4 children or 4 babies born and lived in our family. In 1380, we had Adrian Lane, Isabel Gregory, and her twin brother, Ivan Gregory. And then in 1383, we had Juliet Gregory born. And then there were no more children for the Red family. And part of that is because of the people that we lost this decade. So we had Frey Lane died and Victor Lane died. And both of them were supposed to be having children. So both of them dying kind of stopped all the children that we were having. And then we even lost Frey's daughter, Yesenia Lane. She died as a toddler. And then, speaking of losing children, Isabel and her husband Gunderson had 3 children who died. First, the twin Isabel Gregory died as a toddler. Garance Gregory also died as a toddler. And then Juliet Gregory died as a child. So it was not a good time in the Red family. And you can see that we went from a lot of people up here to not very many people down here. We also lost just some people from old age. So we lost Adrian and his wife, and we lost Mary just from old age. So we are left with Isabel. First, we're left with Garance. Garance is the oldest person in our family, and her daughter Isabel has 1 child left, Ivan, that was born in 1380. And then here's her husband, Gunderson, here. Then we don't have Frey and we don't have Victor, but we have Victor's wife, Elena, and she has been raising Frey's children. So we have the teenager Frey and the child, Adrian, right here. And that's it. That is what has happened to our Red family from 1380 to 1390. So I'm hoping that with these 3 boys, they will have more children in the 1390s and that 1400s picture will look a lot different. For our yellow family, we're going to start out with the marriages. We had Gold Goodwin get married to Liam Bloom. We also had Gwendolyn Jones get married to Thomas Paine. That's it. Those were the 2 marriages. Now let's talk about the babies who were born who lived. In 1383, we had Horace Goodwin. In 1385, we had Adam Hammond. And in 1389, we had Philip Bloom. That's it. Only those 3. Now let's talk about the people who died. We had 5 people who died, and they were all women. Rose Hammond died, Bray Goodwin, Maud Archer, Ursa McCarthy, and Zuria Hammond. So as you can see, a lot of them had spouses, and now their spouses are down here with their children. And like this guy is raising his nephew and his children because both of Christopher Archer's parents died. We also have Adam Hammond raising his 2 children as well. And Gwendolyn, I just said she got married and now she's back with her family in 1390. Why is that? And it is because she got married. She had a baby who died. Her husband died. She had another baby who died. All in this 10-year span from 80 to 89, and now she is back home with her family. It was just a horrible year for some people, and then it was also a good year for some people. I can't wait to see the Yellow family expand even more and have more babies and more teenagers as they age up. Now we move to our tiny little Blue family, and we did have a wedding. We had Letice Price get married to Julian Whitlock in 1388. And that was it. That was the only wedding. There were 3 births this year, who lived. So first we had, in 1381, Johanna Morgan. In 1382, Greta Morgan. And in 1389, Julian Whitlock. So we have almost the same number. Here we had 5 adults and 3 children, and now we have 4 adults and 3 children. We lost Francine of old age. Catherine is still alive, along with her husband Vitalis, but instead of their twin boys, they only have Arthur left alive. Grayson Morgan died, but his baby boy Grayson is now a kid over here being raised by his stepmother Johanna. Now, where are those little girls, you're wondering? Well, they both died this year. Johanna died as a child, and Greta died as a toddler. We also lost Letice Price, which is why her husband Julian is here alone with their baby Julian. And we lost Matthew Price as a toddler. When Vitalis got back from the war, Catherine got pregnant and they had Matthew, and he died as a toddler. So it was a lot of ups and downs for the Blue family, and we're left here with 3 children who need to carry on this branch of our family. Now we move on to the family that doesn't really need help carrying on this branch. They are getting larger and larger. And first we're going to talk about the weddings. So we had Owen Smith get married to Juniper. We had Gold Miller get married to Milo Bloom. We had Isaac Summer get married to Dawn. And we had Sybil Smith get married to Jackson Whitlock. So we had a lot of purple weddings. We also had a lot of purple babies. Every year this decade, except for 2 years, we had babies who lived. In 1380, we had Hugh Miller. In 1382, we had Frederick Miller. In 1383, we had Isaac Miller. In 1383, also, we had Kai Miller. In 1384, we had Larkin Miller. In 1386, we had Juniper Smith. In 1387, we had Noel Smith. In 1388, we had Otis Bell. And then in 1389, we had Dawn Summer. So we had a lot of really good luck with our births. We also had a lot of really good luck with birthdays. We unfortunately lost Frederick Miller as a child. And then the only 2 deaths were Arna and Maleficent. When they aged up, they both died. So they're twins. Isla is down here waiting to get married, and Isaac is here with his wife and new baby. We did lose Wallace and Flora and Ingrid of old age, but everybody else lived. Our purple family is just getting bigger and bigger, and our kids are now all becoming teenagers, and they're about to start getting married and having children. I cannot wait to see what's going to happen in the 1390s. And that finally brings us to our main house, where, yes, we had a wedding. We had Sebastian get married to Alice. One of you guys created her, and she has been perfect. We also have, in 1380, Ida with Kellen and Rose and Sebastian. And Kellen and Ida still live in the house, but they're just not part of the main house. They're technically part of the purple family. So, who was born this decade? First, we had baby Alice in 1386, and then in 1388, We had Sebastian and Ida born, and they all lived. We had no one other than newborn babies die in our main household in 1380. So overall this year, we had some horribly sad moments, especially at the beginning on that live stream, if anybody was there. We also had some really cute and heartwarming moments, and I have loved all of it. I loved taking the pictures of people acting goofy and taking the pictures of the new stuff. We got a tree house for the first time this year. We got infants for the first time in this decade, and we saw some very, very peculiar things happening. And it was still amazing. And I loved all of it. I cannot wait to do the next decade with you guys. Let me know your thoughts down below. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Bye. Hi, and welcome to the recap. We're going to talk about how this family changed in the 1390s, and we're going to take it by colors like we have done in the last couple of years, and we'll just talk about the births that they had and the marriages that they had and who we lost along the way. Let's go. So we kick it off with the Red family, who probably had the least number of changes, honestly, from 1390 to 1400. They had 0 people born. We did have one wedding, which was Ivan Gregory got married to Caitlin Dumond. That was at the very end of the year. And I guess I should say they didn't have any births who lived. Ivan and Caitlin did have a baby named Ivan Gregory who died. So there were not any babies who lived. But Frey will be getting married soon, and Ivan and Caitlin will continue to have babies. So I expect this Red family will look a lot different as we move into the 1410s. Now, let's talk about who we lost. Our old lady Garance died in this decade, as did Ivan's dad, Gunderson. And then you can, of course, see that Ivan and Adrian both aged up to teenagers this decade. So that's it with our Red family. Just a quick little update. They are the ones that live in France, and I expect good things over the next decade. Now we move to our Yellow family, who had a lot of things happen, both good and bad this year. So first, let's talk about the marriages. We had Ursa Jones get married to Ace Wickerson. We had Christopher Archer get married to Beatrice Talbot. We had Victor Jones get married to Roxana Small. And we had William Goodwin get married to Lindsay Cooley. So they had quite a few marriages. They had quite a few births. I'm only going to talk about the births who lived, and then we'll talk about what happened to them, like ultimately through the thing. So in 1391, they had Wyatt Bloom. In 1393, they had Ace Wickerson and Bianca Bloom. In 1394, they had Ursa Wickerson. In 1395, they had Justine Bloom. In 1396, they had Roxana Jones. In 1397, they had Simon Bloom. In 1398, they had Beatrix Wickerson, Victor Jones, and William Goodwin. And in 1399, they had Ian Archer. So they had a lot of babies born this year. It's been really nice. Looking down here, you can see all the toddlers who are still the toddlers. There's only one toddler. I meant infants who are all still alive. I guess there are a couple more toddlers. They're just being held by their parents. But let's talk about the people that we lost this year. We lost William, and I keep saying year, but I mean decade. We lost William. And his son, William, is still here, who came down here and got married and has a new baby named William. So we have 3 Williams here. But anyway, we lost our William. We lost Gold, but her husband is still alive, and he has 5 of their children still left living with him. We still have Bruce Goodwin's whole family. Both of his kids are alive, and they're not married yet, but they are teenagers. We still have Andrew McCarthy living by himself, waiting to get married. He'll be getting married soon. We have Christopher Archer, who got married, and they have 2 children right now. We did lose Adam Hammond, but his children Zuria and Adam are still alive and waiting to get married. And we lost Gwendolyn Jones, who had a horrible 1380s by losing 2 children and a husband, and then she died in the 1390s. However, her siblings, both Ursa and Victor, got married, and they both have, Ursa has 3 children who are alive, and Victor has 2 children who are alive. So the Jones family had a really good decade after a horrible start with Gwendolyn dying. We only have Porter left over in War. Everybody else in this family lives in England. Horace, right here, Horace Goodwin, is about to be leaving pretty soon for an adventure of his own. But that's where we are right now in 1400. Now to our Blue family. You can see that we ended the 1390s, or we ended the 1380s with them having 7 people total in their household. And we're ending this decade with them having 9 total people. So let's talk about the marriages. First, we had Arthur Price marry Julian Carroll. Then we had Grayson Morgan marry Bella McCarthy. For the first time that 2 of our colors have married each other. So Bella is from the Yellow family, and she married Grayson, who is part of the Blue family. So now Bella is part of the Blue family. And I will change her clothes to blue. I just wanted to leave it yellow for these pictures, and now we will change her and let her officially be part of the Blue family. So now let's talk about births. They didn't have anybody get married, anybody have babies until 1395. And we had Arthur Price and Bella Morgan. And then in 1397, Grayson Morgan. And then in 1399, Evan Price. So those children are still alive. Each couple here has 2 kids, and they're all still alive. Sadly, we lost little baby Julian at the very beginning of the 1390s. We also lost Johanna, and we lost Vitalis and Catherine. So the only one of the adults still left over here is Julian, and he doesn't have any children. So Uncle Julian is just taking care of everybody and hanging out with everybody now. And that is where we leave our Blue family in the 1400s. They are going to continue to have kids. So I can't wait to see how much bigger they get. They all live in England right now. In our game, it's Hinford on Bagley is where they live, but it's still part of England. So that's our Blue family. And then we move to the gigantically huge family. I don't know any other way to put it. Our Purple family has exploded. And I know it all goes back to the fact that one generation ago, our Purple family had 20 children total, and only one of those became an heir. So I guess 19 children to just spread out. So that's what's been happening, is a lot of spreading out. So first, let's talk about the marriages that we had, because there were a lot. So we had Isla Summer marry William Fisher. We had Wallace Smith marry Sibylla Bennett. Giovanni McOtter married Piper Dawson. Ingrid Smith married Frances Carroll. Elijah Miller married Annabelle Blackwood. Winifred Miller married Lewis Chaucer. Isaac Miller married Dominique Volpe. Kai Miller married Elpis Angelos. And that is where we end the marriages. There were a lot, 8 of them. And then that means, of course, there were a lot of children. We already had people having babies during this time. So there were a lot of births. So let's go through them. In 1390, we had Rose Bell. In 1391, we had Tolley Smith and William Fisher. Sadly, his mother Isla died during childbirth. 1392, we had Wallace Smith and Giovanni McOtter. 1393, we had Alan Bell, Ingrid Carroll, and Daniel Smith. 1394, we had Elle Summer and Gloria Smith. 1395, we had Isaiah Bell, Frances Carroll, and Maleficent Summer. 1396, we had Kenrick Whitlock and Solomon McOtter. In 1397, we had Peter Carroll and Zena McOtter. In 1399, we had Gareth Summer, Justine McOtter, and Katrina Whitlock. So that was a lot. That was a lot of people born and a lot of people that got married. We also had quite a few people that died. So first of all, I'm going to break it down and talk about it by where they live. I've kind of got them separated off. If you look right here, there's a gap right here, and everybody on this side lives in England. So we're going to save them and do them later, and we'll touch on this group right here first. So these guys, these 5 people right here, live in Ireland, and this is Larkin and this is Lenata. Lenata is the mom, so let's start there. Lenata's the mom, and she is raising Hugh, who is her nephew, because both of his parents are dead. We lost both of our twins, Edmund and Elijah, and we lost Quentin and Elvira, and we lost Wallace, and we lost Isla in childbirth, and that's it. For the adults, we did lose a couple of the children as well, but for the adults, that's it. So we have Lenata still living in Ireland. She's waiting. Hugh is going to be getting married in 1400, so he is ready to get married, and Larkin will be getting married as well coming up. Isaac Miller is already married. He got married to Dominic, and they do not have any children yet. Then we move, that's everybody in Ireland. Then we move over to Romania, where we have Elijah and his wife, Annabelle, and they have 2 children who are alive right now, and his sister, Lenata, lives with them. And those are the people in Romania. Then we move over to Scotland, where we have Solomon, old man Solomon, over here with his son, Giovanni, Giovanni's wife, Piper, and their 3 children who are alive right now. The McOtters have 4 children. This little boy actually belongs to the McOtters because Elijah and Annabelle have only had 1 boy who has lived so far. So there we go. The Scottish family has 4 little babies. Romania has 1, and Ireland right now has none, but they just got married over there. So now let's go to England. So we have not had a ton of changes. We do have Flora, who is raising her nephew right here. This boy right here is Daniel Smith, and he's the last Smith. Wallace got married to Sibylla, and they both died in this decade. They got married, they had 3 children, and their children have died except for Daniel. So Daniel is being raised by his Aunt Flora, and everybody else is just in their little family units, except we did have Isla up here, who got married to William Fisher and had a baby and died giving birth to her very first baby, and then the baby died. And so her husband is gone. He left and went back to his family. Our little purple family went from having 34 people in 1390 to having 45 people in 1400. And I only see this family getting bigger and bigger. And that finally brings us to the main household. And as you can see, we started 1390 with a mom and dad and 3 children. And we end 1390s with no dad and only 2 children. This is Ida, and this is her right here in 1390, little baby Ida right here. Harris was not even born. So let's talk about who was born. In 1390, they had Ruth Miller, who lived to be a child, and then she died. And in 1394, they had Harris Miller, and he will be becoming a child in 1400. And he is our heir. Sebastian died this year. This was little Alice. She grew up to be a child and she died. This was Sebastian. He grew up to be a child and he died. And so this main household lost 3 of their children when they became children, which is so weird. If you've watched the things, you know this, because there's only 3 numbers to roll to become a child. And for some reason, my main household, actually, I'm having a hard time with the whole family, is having a hard time rolling not those 3 numbers. So I'm kind of glad that the numbers start switching up in the 1400s. They're not necessarily easier, but they're not the same numbers. So that will be nice for me to not have the same numbers all the time. And so here we are. We end this decade with a potential heir in this tiny little boy's body, and hopefully he makes it to adulthood and gets married and has babies of his own who do not die. And that's where we will be. Here is our family in 1400. I couldn't even get everybody on one page. So we have all adults and teens on this page, and we have children, toddlers, and infants on this page. And I love it. I cannot wait to see what happens with all of them and how everything changes in the next decade. And so I will see you guys then. Thank you so much for watching and joining me for 100 years in the Miller family. Bye.